What if I told you that the man who stole $132 million from one of America's most dangerous cartels was the same person the community trusted to save their lives? I'm talking about Rafael Sandoval, Station 47's golden boy. The guy who pulled kids from burning buildings and had a wall full of commendations. The firefighter mothers pointed to when they told their sons what a real hero looked like. But here's what they didn't know. While Rafael was accepting awards at City Hall, he was planning the most audacious theft in criminal history. While he was saving lives during the day, he was studying cartel operations at night. And while the FBI was hunting for a ghost, that ghost was sleeping in the firehouse bunk bed right down the street. See, we think we know people. We see the uniform, the badge, the public service, and we make assumptions. Rafael counted on that. He built his entire criminal empire on the fact that nobody suspects the guy who runs into burning buildings while everyone else runs out. Here's the thing about trust. It's the perfect weapon when you know how to use it. And Rafael? He weaponized 15 years of heroic service into the ultimate criminal cover. Emergency vehicles don't get stopped. Firefighters don't get questioned. And decorated first responders definitely don't get investigated for stealing cartel money. Before we dive in, ask yourself this. If someone this dangerous could fool an entire city and the FBI, what else are you missing in plain sight? Subscribe now, because by the time you figure it out, it might already be too late. And if you're not subscribing, at least tell us why in the comments. The rest of us want to know what you're thinking. This isn't just about one man's fall from grace. This is about how the Serpiente Cartel lost $132 million and never even knew who took it. How the FBI chased shadows for 3 years while their target collected community service awards. How a grief-stricken firefighter turned his pain into the perfect crime and walked away untouchable. But the real question isn't how Rafael stole the money. It's how he convinced everyone, including federal agents, that he was too good to be guilty. Because the most dangerous criminals aren't hiding in dark alleys. They're standing in the light, wearing badges, earning your respect while they rob you blind. 3 years before Rafael became America's most wanted ghost, he was just a firefighter who loved his little sister. Isabella was 22. Fresh out of college, working at a community center in Little Havana. She had this laugh that could fill a room and this annoying habit of calling Rafael every Sunday to make sure he was eating actual meals instead of gas station burritos. On March 8th, that stopped forever. Isabella wasn't supposed to be there that night. She'd stayed late to help set up for a kids' basketball tournament the next morning. Wrong place, wrong time. 2 cartel factions decided to settle their territorial dispute right outside the community center. Bullets don't care about innocent bystanders. Rafael got the call at 11:47 p.m. Shots fired, multiple casualties, all units respond. He didn't know one of those casualties was his sister until he saw her lying on the pavement, blood pooling around her head like a broken halo. He did everything right. Applied pressure to the wound. Called for advanced life support. Started CPR when her pulse went weak. But Isabella died in his arms anyway, staring up at him with eyes that asked a question he couldn't answer. Why couldn't you save me? Here's what nobody talks about when they discuss heroes. We save strangers every single day. We pull people from car wrecks, drag them out of burning buildings, restart their hearts in ambulances. But when it's your own family bleeding out on cold concrete, all that training means nothing. He saved strangers for a living but couldn't save his own sister. If you still think this story is just entertainment, you're not paying attention. Subscribe before the next Rafael walks past you wearing a uniform. The official report called it gang violence. Random crossfire. No suspects identified. Case closed within 6 weeks because nobody cared enough to dig deeper. Isabella became another statistic in Miami's war on drugs, forgotten by everyone except the brother who watched her die. That's when something fundamental broke inside Rafael. Not cracked. Broke. The man who'd spent 15 years believing in justice, in serving the community, in protecting the innocent, he realized it was all meaningless. The system he'd devoted his life to had failed the one person who mattered most. You know what's funny about grief? Everyone expects it to make you stronger. They tell you it builds character. They say your loved one would want you to move on, to heal, to find peace. But sometimes grief doesn't build anything. Sometimes it just burns everything down from the inside. Rafael went back to work 2 weeks later. Same uniform, same smile, same hero act. But his colleagues noticed changes. He volunteered for the most dangerous calls. He took risks that made veteran firefighters nervous. It was like he was testing fate, daring the universe to take him too. What they didn't see were the late nights. Rafael sitting in his apartment, staring at crime scene photos he'd convinced a detective friend to share. Learning the names of every Serpiente Cartel member who operated in Little Havana. Studying their routines, their territories, their weaknesses. The department psychologist recommended counseling. Rafael went to 3 sessions and learned to say the right words. I'm processing my grief in a healthy way. I understand that Isabella's death wasn't my fault. I'm committed to moving forward. All lies. Because Rafael wasn't moving forward. He was planning backward. Every cartel member who might have been involved in that shooting. Every drug dealer who contributed to the violence that killed his sister. Every system that failed to protect her or punish her killers. They created a monster and dressed him in a hero's uniform. The scary part? Nobody saw it coming. Rafael had advantages most criminals could only dream of. But he didn't realize it until he started hunting the people who killed his sister. Think about it. When's the last time you questioned a firefighter? When emergency medical services shows up at your door, do you ask for ID? When a fire truck drives through your neighborhood at 2 a.m., do you wonder what they're really doing? Rafael had been invisible his entire career. 15 years of walking into places most people couldn't access. Rich neighborhoods, government buildings, private warehouses. Emergency responders go everywhere and nobody asks questions. They carry equipment, move fast, operate under stress. Perfect cover for someone who needed to get close to dangerous people. The Serpiente Cartel controlled everything from Hialeah to Homestead. Their leader, Esteban Machado, was smart enough to avoid the flashy lifestyle that got other cartel bosses arrested. No gold chains, no expensive cars, no social media presence. He ran his operation like a Fortune 500 company, quietly, efficiently, and with absolute ruthlessness. Machado's people moved product through a network of legitimate businesses. Restaurants that served more than food. Construction companies that built more than buildings. And car washes, lots of car washes, where dirty money got cleaned along with luxury vehicles. Rafael spent 6 months learning their patterns. Not as a cop or federal agent who had to follow rules and get warrants. As a firefighter conducting routine safety inspections. Nobody questions fire safety. Building codes are serious business. Insurance companies demand regular inspections. So Rafael inspected. And inspected. And inspected. He discovered Machado's fatal weakness. The man was a creature of habit. Every 2 weeks, like clockwork, cash moved from collection points to a central warehouse in Hialeah. Always the same route. Always the same time frame. Always the same security protocols. The warehouse sat 6 blocks from Station 47. Rafael drove past it twice daily for 3 years and never paid attention. Now he studied it like his life depended on it. Because it did. During the day, Rafael saved lives. Pulled people from car accidents. Administered CPR to heart attack victims. Rescued cats from trees and kids from swimming pools. The community loved him. Local news featured him twice for heroic rescues. The mayor personally thanked him for his service. At night, Rafael became someone else entirely. He memorized guard rotations. Studied surveillance camera angles. Learned which employees left early and which ones stayed late. He mapped escape routes and timed response protocols. The beautiful irony. Rafael was investigating a criminal organization using skills the fire department taught him. Risk assessment. Emergency planning. Understanding building layouts and structural weaknesses. Reading people under pressure. Machado had no idea that Miami's most decorated firefighter was planning to rob him blind. Why would he? Heroes don't steal. Public servants don't commit crimes. The guy who saves your life doesn't plot to destroy yours. But Rafael wasn't thinking like a hero anymore. Heroes follow rules. Heroes trust the system. Heroes believe justice will prevail. Rafael had learned that sometimes justice needs help. And he was perfectly positioned to provide it. The predator was hiding in plain sight, wearing a badge that made him untouchable. October 15th, 2:47 a.m. Rafael had been waiting for this moment for 8 months. The electrical fire started exactly as planned. Rafael had studied that warehouse's wiring system during his safety inspections. He knew which circuit would overload if pushed beyond capacity, which breaker would fail if subjected to the right kind of stress, which section of the building would ignite fastest. The call came through dispatch at 2:49 a.m. Structure fire, 4400 block of West 12th Avenue. Multiple units respond. Rafael's heart rate stayed steady. 15 years of emergency response had taught him to control adrenaline. But this was different. Tonight, he wasn't running toward a fire to put it out. He was running toward a fire he'd started to commit the perfect crime. His crew reached the scene in 4 minutes. Flames were already consuming the north wing of the warehouse. Thick black smoke billowed into the Miami night sky. Cartel security guards stood outside, screaming in Spanish, pointing at the building like they could will the fire to stop. What they didn't know was that their money wasn't in the burning section. Rafael had memorized the warehouse layout during months of inspections. The cash was stored in fireproof safes in the basement, far from the flames. Completely accessible if you knew where to look. Captain Morrison assigned Rafael to structural assessment. Sandoval, take Johnson and check the basement for integrity issues. Make sure this whole thing doesn't come down on us. Perfect. Rafael had counted on that assignment. Basement duty was always given to the most experienced firefighter, the one the captain trusted to handle the dangerous stuff. Rafael descended into the basement with Johnson, carrying what looked like standard emergency equipment. Specialized cutting tools. Heavy-duty bags designed for debris removal. Gear that could hold a lot of weight without drawing attention. I'll check the south side, Rafael told Johnson. You take the north. Radio if you find any structural damage. Johnson nodded and disappeared into the smoke-filled corridor. Rafael had 17 minutes. That's how long structural assessments typically took in buildings this size. 17 minutes before Johnson would expect him back. 17 minutes before the captain would start asking questions. Rafael found the safes exactly where Machado's people had told him they'd be. 3 industrial-grade units built to survive fires, floods, and everything short of nuclear war. But Rafael had learned something during his inspections that the cartel didn't know. These safes had a design flaw. A backdoor built by the manufacturer for law enforcement access. Rafael had the access codes. Don't ask how. Let's just say fire inspectors talk to a lot of people, and some of those people owe favors to guys who save lives for a living. The first safe opened at the 4-minute mark. Stacks of cash, rubber-banded and organized by denomination. More money than Rafael had ever seen in one place. But he wasn't here to marvel. He was here to work. Safe 2, 7 minutes. Safe 3, 11 minutes. $132 million in untraceable cash, loaded into equipment bags that looked exactly like the gear every firefighter carried. Rafael's hands moved with the same calm precision he used during medical emergencies. No shaking. No hesitation. Just professional execution under pressure. At the 16-minute mark, Rafael sealed the last bag and headed back toward Johnson's position. Above them, his colleagues were still fighting the fire he'd started, risking their lives to save a building that belonged to the people who'd killed his sister. Find anything? Johnson asked when Rafael appeared through the smoke. Structure looks solid, Rafael replied. No immediate collapse risk. We're good to continue operations upstairs. They climbed back to ground level, where the scene was controlled chaos. Fire trucks, ambulances, police cars. News crews setting up for the morning broadcasts. Cartel members watching their legitimate business burn, having no idea their real business had just been stolen. While the FBI thought they were honoring a hero, he was robbing the cartel during a fire. If you're still watching without subscribing, you're exactly who this story is warning about. The type who watches history unfold and forgets it tomorrow. Prove you're not blind to this madness. Subscribe now, or explain your silence in the comments. By dawn, the fire was out. The warehouse was a smoking ruin. And Rafael was loading his equipment into the fire truck, surrounded by colleagues who thought he was a hero. The genius wasn't just stealing the money. It was stealing it while appearing to risk his life trying to save the very building he was robbing. The cartel assumed their cash had been destroyed in the fire. The fire department commended Rafael for his bravery under dangerous conditions. $132 million gone. And the only suspect was the guy everyone wanted to give a medal to. Here's what nobody expected. Rafael didn't run. Most criminals who steal from cartels disappear. New identity, new country, new life. They know that staying means death when the cartel figures out who robbed them. But Rafael did something that baffled both law enforcement and the criminal underworld. He stayed in Miami, kept his job, kept his apartment, kept showing up for his shifts at Station 47 like nothing had happened. The criminal world couldn't understand it. You don't steal $132 million from Esteban Machado and then grab coffee at the same diner every morning. That's not how this works. That's suicide. But Rafael wasn't thinking like a criminal. He was thinking like a firefighter. And firefighters know that the safest place during a fire isn't always the exit. Sometimes it's the center of the building, where the flames can't reach you. Rafael started small. Emergency equipment supply companies. Perfectly logical for a firefighter to know that business. He had connections throughout the fire department. Relationships with vendors. Understanding of what emergency services needed and when they needed it. The businesses provided perfect cover for moving cash. Emergency services operate on crisis schedules. They need equipment fast, they pay quickly, and they don't ask questions about unusual delivery times or payment methods. When lives are on the line, paperwork takes a back seat. Rafael's recruitment strategy was brilliant. He didn't target hardened criminals or cartel rejects. He targeted people with legitimate skills who were overlooked by everyone else. Paramedics drowning in student debt. Former military struggling to find civilian work. Mechanics with sick family members and medical bills they couldn't afford. These weren't bad people. They were desperate people. And desperate people with useful skills make the most loyal employees when someone finally gives them a real opportunity. Each recruit thought they were working for a successful businessman who happened to have started as a firefighter. They had no idea their employer was the same man who'd stolen cartel money and humiliated the FBI. Why would they? Rafael kept his firefighter job, maintained his community ties, and lived the exact same life he'd always lived. But Rafael's masterstroke came 18 months after the heist. He announced the creation of the Rafael Sandoval Foundation, a charity dedicated to helping families affected by gang violence. The donation was $2 million. Public. With media coverage and city officials present for the ribbon cutting. Think about the psychology of that move. Rafael took money stolen from the cartel that killed his sister and used it to create a foundation in her memory. Blood money transformed into charitable donations. Theft transformed into philanthropy. The foundation wasn't just emotional cover. It was legal armor. How do you investigate a man who donates millions to help victims of the very crimes you're trying to solve? How do you question someone whose charity work is helping the community heal from gang violence? Local news featured Rafael regularly. Not as a suspect, but as a success story. The firefighter who turned personal tragedy into public service. The hero who honored his sister's memory by helping other families avoid the same loss. City council members attended foundation events. Police chiefs shook Rafael's hand at charity dinners. FBI agents assigned to the cartel task force probably donated to the Rafael Sandoval Foundation without realizing they were funding the man they were hunting. Rafael became untouchable through respectability. Every commendation, every charitable donation, every community service award made him more legitimate, more trusted, more impossible to suspect. By year 2, Rafael's network stretched from Miami to the Bahamas. Legitimate businesses with legitimate licenses, proper tax payments, and glowing references from community leaders. Money laundering on an unprecedented scale, hidden behind emergency equipment sales and charitable foundations. The FBI task force expanded to include agents from multiple agencies, but they were chasing smoke. They could track money flows and document business transactions. They could see Rafael's rapid rise as an entrepreneur. But every investigation led to the same conclusion: successful businessman with strong community ties and impeccable character references. Rafael had achieved something most criminals never even attempt. He'd stolen a fortune and convinced the system to protect him. Not by hiding from the law, but by becoming so respected that the law would never consider him a threat. The most dangerous criminals aren't the ones running from justice. They're the ones justice refuses to pursue. Special Agent Patricia Hawthorne had been hunting the Serpiente Cartel for 3 years when the warehouse fire landed on her desk. At first, she saw it as another setback. Another dead end in her pursuit of Esteban Machado's money trail. But something about the timing bothered her. Fires don't start themselves at 2:47 a.m. in heavily secured warehouses. Especially fires that happen to destroy millions in cartel cash right before a major money transfer. Patricia started pulling records. Fire department response times. Security footage from neighboring businesses. Employee schedules. Insurance claims. The kind of methodical investigation that FBI agents are trained to conduct. The inconsistencies emerged slowly. Fire trucks arriving unusually fast for their location. Basement access that lasted exactly 17 minutes. Surveillance cameras that mysteriously malfunctioned during critical time frames. But every lead pointed to the same conclusion. The Miami Fire Department had responded professionally to a tragic but routine warehouse fire. No evidence of foul play. No suspicious behavior. Just heroic first responders doing their job under dangerous conditions. Patricia's investigation focused on the obvious suspects. Disgruntled cartel members with inside knowledge. Rival organizations looking to hurt Machado's operation. Corrupt officials who might have advanced knowledge of cash storage locations. She never considered that the thief might be sitting in plain sight, wearing a badge, attending community events, and receiving commendations for the very fire he'd started. The FBI task force expanded. More agents, more resources, more sophisticated surveillance equipment. They tracked financial flows throughout South Florida. Monitored known cartel associates. Analyzed communication patterns and travel records. Meanwhile, Rafael was attending foundation board meetings and accepting another community service award from the mayor. The closest Patricia came to the truth was 6 months after the heist. Financial analysis revealed unusual cash flows through emergency equipment suppliers. Large transactions with non-standard payment schedules. Business growth that seemed too rapid for normal market conditions. Rafael's companies were on the list. Patricia even interviewed him personally as part of their comprehensive business survey. She sat across a conference table from the man who'd stolen $132 million and asked him about his remarkable success as an entrepreneur. "It's really about understanding the market," Rafael explained. "Emergency services have unique needs and tight deadlines. If you can provide reliable equipment quickly, departments are willing to pay premium prices." Patricia found his answers logical. His business model made sense. His financial records were immaculate. His character references were glowing. She moved on to the next company on her list, never knowing she'd just interviewed America's most wanted thief. The FBI never even saw it coming, and neither would you. If you're still not subscribed, what makes you so sure you'd be smarter than them? Drop a comment explaining your confidence, or your excuse. The investigation consumed 2 years and cost millions in federal resources. They analyzed thousands of hours of surveillance footage, interviewed hundreds of potential suspects, followed money trails through 7 states and 3 countries. Every lead went nowhere. Every suspect had alibis. Every theory collapsed under scrutiny. Patricia's final report concluded that the warehouse theft was likely an inside job conducted by unknown cartel members who'd since fled the country. Case suspended pending new evidence. What she didn't know was that Rafael had studied FBI procedures as thoroughly as he'd studied cartel operations. He knew how federal investigations worked, what evidence they looked for, how they built cases, where they focused their attention. His sister's death had taught him that criminals who operate in shadows eventually get caught. But Rafael wasn't operating in shadows. He was operating in daylight, protected by respect, legitimacy, and the badge he'd never given up. You can't catch a ghost that's hiding in uniform, especially when that uniform makes him invisible. 3 years after stealing $132 million from the Serpiente Cartel, Rafael Sandoval had become exactly what he'd always appeared to be, a pillar of the community. His business empire stretched from Miami to Nassau. Emergency equipment contracts worth tens of millions. Real estate investments in prime locations. Legitimate partnerships with government agencies and private corporations. On paper, Rafael looked like every American success story. The public servant who built something meaningful after personal tragedy. The Isabella Sandoval Foundation had helped over 400 families affected by gang violence. Scholarship programs for at-risk youth. Victim support services. Community safety initiatives. Local politicians used Rafael's foundation as a model for public-private partnerships. Nobody questioned where the money came from anymore. 3 years of consistent business growth. Documented revenue streams. Proper tax filings. Clean audits. The stolen cartel cash had been washed so thoroughly through legitimate businesses that it was impossible to distinguish from earned income. Rafael's network operated with the precision he'd learned during 15 years of emergency response. Careful recruitment. Methodical planning. No unnecessary risks. Unlike traditional criminal organizations that relied on violence and intimidation, Rafael's people operated through intelligence and legitimate business practices. The FBI task force had grown to include agents from DEA, ATF, and Homeland Security. Interagency cooperation on an unprecedented scale. Hundreds of man-hours dedicated to solving a crime that officially remained unsolved. But they weren't chasing a criminal anymore. They were investigating a businessman whose success story inspired community leadership seminars. A philanthropist whose charitable work was featured in national magazines. A former firefighter whose foundation was being studied by universities as a model for trauma-informed community development. Rafael had achieved something that most criminals can't even imagine. He'd made his crime irrelevant. Even if someone discovered what he'd done 3 years ago, what would they prosecute? The businesses were legitimate. The foundation helped real families. The money had been transformed into genuine community benefit. Was Rafael a criminal who'd stolen cartel money? Or was he a grief-stricken brother who'd taken blood money and turned it into something meaningful? Did it matter anymore? The man who'd once held his dying sister in his arms had become untouchable. Not because he was hiding from the system, but because the system was protecting him. Every award, every charitable donation, every business success made him more legitimate and less suspicious. Rafael had learned something that most people never understand. The difference between legal and illegal often depends on who's asking the questions. And when you're respected enough, people stop asking questions altogether. The Serpiente Cartel's money was gone forever, transformed from criminal proceeds into legitimate business assets and charitable donations. The FBI's investigation was suspended. Rafael's transformation was complete. He'd won. Completely. Permanently. And everyone who mattered was grateful for his success. So here we are. Rafael Sandoval, decorated firefighter turned untouchable kingpin, living proof that the most dangerous people aren't the ones you're afraid of. They're the ones you trust. He stole $132 million from a cartel and convinced an entire city to protect him while he did it. The FBI spent 3 years chasing shadows while their target collected community service awards. A grief-stricken brother turned his pain into the perfect crime and walked away clean. But here's what keeps me awake at night. Was Rafael wrong? Think about it. His sister died because of cartel violence. The system failed to protect her or punish her killers. The money he stole was blood money, profits from drugs, violence, and human misery. He took that dirty cash and turned it into scholarships for kids, support for victims, and genuine community healing. Does that make him a hero or a villain? Does it matter? Rafael discovered something most of us never learn. Grief doesn't just break people. Sometimes it rewrites them completely. The man who held his dying sister wasn't the same person who planned that warehouse heist. Trauma had transformed a protector into a predator, but a predator who wore the mask so perfectly that nobody could tell the difference. That's the real lesson here. We think we know people. We see the uniform, the awards, the charitable work, and we make assumptions. But the line between hero and criminal is thinner than we want to believe. Sometimes it's just a matter of which side of tragedy you land on. Rafael proved that respect is the ultimate weapon when you know how to use it. That legitimacy can make you untouchable. That the most dangerous criminals aren't hiding in dark alleys. They're standing in the light, earning your trust while they plan your destruction. The scary part isn't that Rafael got away with it. The scary part is how easy it was. How a badge and a few commendations made him invisible to the very people hunting him. How charity work transformed him from suspect to saint. Rafael Sandoval is still out there. Still running his businesses. Still helping families through his foundation. Still collecting awards for community service. And still completely untouchable, protected by the respect he weaponized and the system he learned to manipulate. Was he a hero seeking justice, or the villain hiding in your neighborhood? Either way, this isn't just a story. It's a warning. Subscribe now, because while you're debating morality, someone else is planning the next perfect crime. And if you're not hitting that button, say why. The rest of us want to know who you trust.